I'm Darby Hoover. I'm a Senior Resource Specialist at the Natural Resources Defense Council. We are a international environmental organization with about 500 staff members working on a wide variety of environmental issues. I work with primarily our food and agriculture program on issues related to food waste. I think most people would be shocked to learn that Americans waste 40% of food in the U.S. today. So that means 40% of the food that starts out at the farm goes uneaten. This means that Americans are throwing out the equivalent of $165 billion every year. But not only that, we're also essentially throwing out 25% of all fresh water that's used in the U.S. and huge amounts of chemicals, energy, and land that are used to grow that food. If we could reduce the loss of that food by just 15%, we could feed more than 25 million Americans every year. All of these add up, and this is due to different parts of the system. So this is everything from stuff that's grown and never harvested to stuff that's bought and never prepared, or that rots in your fridge and you end up throwing it away. All of these different parts of the chain, manufacture, retail, distribution, add up. What this means is that we're not doing a good job of allocating our natural resources in terms of helping to protect the environment. We're wasting water, we're wasting energy, and of course we're wasting the food itself, but all of those inputs that go into the growing of the food. And then of course there are hungry people who we're not feeding when there is food that could be being repurposed to be fed to those people. There's a number of ways that this affects people, and nobody thinks it's an ideal system, but when you start breaking it down and looking at the places where the food loss occurs, it can be hard to figure out what the solution is. As to how the system got this way, I think that's an important question because it didn't always used to be this way. In the 1970s, we didn't waste as much food. We're wasting 50% more food than we were wasting in the 1970s. We're also wasting, in the US, 10 times as much food as people in Southeast Asia. So there's something about the way that we've constructed our food system that needs to get taken apart and rebuilt so that some of these losses don't have to occur anymore. Part of what we're seeing is things like standards of beauty for our food that are maybe unrealistic and unnecessary. So we've got systems that won't let you sell food that doesn't meet a certain exact cosmetic standard. Supermarkets will often keep shelves full until closing time because you don't want to look like you're running out. But that means, again, some of that food may end up getting wasted. There's also widespread confusion about date labeling. People are uncertain the degree to which a date that's stamped on their food might refer to food safety. And so they tend to err on the side of throwing it out if they're not sure. But that means that a lot of perfectly good food is getting thrown away. So we need a system in place to better adapt to some of these changes and also to be a little bit more flexible about how to make sure that we have the right expectations about the food that we buy. So this is a problem that needs to be addressed in a wide variety of sectors. We need to look at what we can do on farms to better use the food that's actually grown. We need to look at what can we do in distribution to help reduce losses. We need to look at how you can help reduce losses at the retail level. And then we need to make sure that consumers have the opportunity to use the food that they purchase. So we need to make sure that consumers understand how to buy food, how to store food, how to cook food. And we also need to make sure that we have a viable food recovery system so that food that is prepared and not served to its intended users can be recovered to the extent possible and fed to people in need. There's no one part that's going to solve the whole problem, but every single part has to be involved. The good news is there's a lot that's being done in a lot of different sectors to help look at this problem. The city of San Francisco, for example, has a number of policies that help make sure that food doesn't end up in the landfill. And something I think that's important to point out is that food is, in fact, the largest portion of what goes into landfills today in the U.S. So 21% of the material that ends up in a landfill is food waste. In terms of reduction, the city of San Francisco, I think, provides some tools for homeowners to look at and tips on how to shop, how to cook, how to store food. And San Francisco has done a lot to ensure that food that is wasted is composted. So San Francisco has mandatory recycling and composting laws. This means that every business and every resident in San Francisco is required to recycle and compost. So for organic waste, that means food waste as well as yard waste. Businesses are required to have composting bins on site. Residents are required to put their food scraps and yard waste in the green bin and put it out at the curb and make sure that's recycled as well. And San Francisco has a great composting system that does make sure all that ends up as useful soil amendment. A lot of it goes to wine country and is used to grow cover crops that help grow the wine that many people in the Bay Area enjoy. So it's a nice circular system. if we're actually engaged in it.